Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. In this episode, I welcome Rich Ting, who plays Bolo on HBO Max's Warrior. I enjoyed hearing his journey from Yale football athlete to Hollywood actor. Rich was honest and open about the challenges he faced and how that transition was not an easy one for him. We also talk about his dedicated fan base who have been petitioning to bring Bolo back since his character died in season 1 of Warrior. It was also great to talk to Rich about some of his other roles in shows like The Man in High Castle, Tommy, Supergirl, and FX's upcoming The Old Man. It was such a pleasure to speak with Rich, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. My favor, as usual, is to please continue to share this podcast with others. It would mean so much if you would also rate it and leave me feedback. If you would like to help keep this podcast going and become a patron of the show, please visit my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to make a donation. I would certainly appreciate it. For comments or suggestions, email me at sifumimichan@gmail.com or reach out on social media at sifumimichan. Now on with the show. Hello, Rich. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
No, thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. I am super psyched to have you here. I told a lot of my friends I was having, Rich, AKA Bolo on the show, and they said, oh, he's so handsome. I said, yes.
Wow. Shout out to your friends. Thank you.
But also talented, and so many things I'm dying to get into with you today. The first, of course, was I loved reading and hearing about your story going from Yale football athlete to actor. And it just seems like such a natural transition for you that you made it look super, super easy. But I know that as a martial artist and as somebody who dabbled in Hollywood, like both something like that collegiate level of athleticism as well as acting require just high levels of commitment and discipline and hard work. So how was that transition? And do you find one more difficult than the other?
Well, first, the transition for me was initially pretty difficult just because it was more of a personal, I had more of a personal block with it just because I don't come from a background. My family is not into the arts and entertainment. Ironically, they're more medical. And so, for other people that have family involved with the industry and stuff like that, you kind of seen it growing up or whatnot. So it may have been easier had I had, my mom or dad involved with, the arts and stuff like that. But for me, it was initially just getting over that first hump, so to speak, in which it was like, am I really going to do this? Am I really going to commit and switch career paths? And to be honest, I tried to prolong it as long as I could. After Yale, I went on to grad school and I tried to buy myself some more time, so to speak,
Right.
Just because I couldn't find that thing that was going to motivate me for the rest of my life. Football had been the driving force as well as other athletics up until college. But then it was kind of like, okay, now it's like, my senior year, second semester, I'm still an athlete at heart. I would love to get in front of the camera, whether that be, sports anchoring. I did work at ESPN for a year and experienced that from that perspective. But I had this childhood passion just to act. And, that's a scary jump, especially when you come from the academic background that I have. Everything is so structured, especially with the martial arts. We learn form, we learn technique. And when you make a leap from more of an academic, structured environment that you've only known your whole life to a more creative, artistic career path that you have no idea what's ahead of you, that was the scariest part for me, and it was, I was encouraged and supported by my mom for sure. She definitely has known me and she knows that creative side. Right. So once I decided to kind of, I kept trying to avoid it. And I mean, I could go through so many stories of how I did that, but it just came to a point where I had taken a law firm job in Los Angeles. I had moved back to the LA area. And then I got offered to do a Warner Brothers gig out of the blue. And I was like, okay, And people don't know is that, especially like my law school and MBA friends, they had no idea I was like a theatrical ninja at night. I was taking classes and,
right.
Going to a studio and just, that was my yoga, so to speak, back in the day. And I didn't really broadcast that to my peers or to like my friends. It was kind of like my personal space. So I was ready to make that jump. I just wasn't aware that I was going to do it professionally. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, once I decided that, and I had the support of, my former law firm, who said, look, go do it. If you fail, come back. Like, that's all I needed to hear, Wow. So, yeah. But I think the hardest part though was, and you'll understand this, just coming from martial arts background, and, maybe it's culturally being Asian American, we're raised in a certain environment where, like I said, there's a lot of discipline, there's a lot of structure, just little things. We don't slouch. We were taught to sit up, shoulders back, postures, everything, project, look the person in the eye with respect, say yes, say thank you. And then whatever we do today is we're going to see that result tomorrow. Right. Mm-hmm. And in this crazy industry, in this crazy Hollywood world, that all that goes away. I had to reprogram myself to know that just because I do this today has nothing to do with tomorrow. There's no test tomorrow. We study for a test today, we take the test tomorrow, and we move on. Right. So right. It took a little bit to reprogram myself from a disciplinary point of view, just because I was so disciplined and I was so used to structure. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you're unemployed and you're by yourself in LA and you're looking around like, how do I get an agent? Like, how do I get an audition? You know what I mean? And there's all these weird things where before there was a formula. You do this, and then this happens. Mm-hmm. And that formula doesn't exist in this industry. So, but by any means, it was just the initial jump that was probably the hardest. And then, like anything else, you adapt.
Yeah, I completely understand. I've actually been in that position where you're in LA and you say, why am I here? And how do you get an agent? What happens first? And then you find yourself in an audition and it's okay, this is something, but then you may not know for however long before things happen. So that lack of structure it drove me crazy, and I can completely relate to that. I'm really fascinated by your journey to Vietnam for 2 years to work on a film, and mm-hmm. how your success in the Asian film market actually translated over to Hollywood. And because that jump doesn't always also work for everybody. And I know you were working here as well, and you did both, but it seems like that really kind of rooted you into that creativity, and it really was quite an experience. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, it kind of segues into what you were speaking about before, as far as like, you're alone in LA, you don't know what you're doing, you're kind of lost. And it really just, I really believe in manifesting and manifestation. And well, now I do, let's say that. But back then, I remember this one day I was thinking, I was like, you know what? I'm fourth generation Asian American. My Japanese side, where my grandparents were born in the States, interned in the Japanese camps. I did not grow up speaking any Asian languages at home. My parents are very, very American. I'm your quintessential Asian American actor in LA, from LA. Like, hello, I'm here, right? And back then, when I was starting out, I realized that a lot of producers, studios, networks, if they were going to have an Asian lead, a male Asian lead, or a male Asian cast, I don't think they were getting my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but my personal opinion at the time was they're not going to look in their backyard, which is where I was, where I've been my whole life. They're going to go to Asia, because they need a following. They a lot of it's financially motivated and stuff like that. And I understood that. Also due to the harsh reality that there weren't a lot of roles for Asian males back in the day. So if they're going to hire one guy for G.I. Joe, it's going to be Lee Byung-hun from Korea, because he's a massive star there and he's going to bring this following because there's one role for this guy mm-hmm. in this huge G.I. Joe family, so to speak, back then at least, right? So I remember just having this epiphany of being like, I got to go to Asia. And I almost got to reverse it. Where this motivation came from, I have no idea. I just popped in my head one day and I was like, okay, so the first chance I get, I need to go to Asia, whether that be China, Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia. Ironically, stuff started happening. I actually went to Beijing and had a meeting and was set to do a huge film there. that just financially, the investors and all that stuff, things fell out and it got delayed. Well, during that process, I also got approached from contacts in Vietnam that they were doing this first ever government funded commemoration of 1,000 years of Hanoi, which is the capital city. And it was based on it was all non-fictional. And however, to spice it up, they wanted to bring in a fictional character, which was ironically me, who was technically a foreigner, rooted more towards the Thailand area, which was his background. So I got approached to this through my contacts, and I kind of just said, you know what, I think this is the move at that point.
Yeah. I'm
going to go to Southeast Asia. I'm going to try to make some noise, is what I call it, and see if that noise is loud enough to bring me back to the States. And I mean, 2 years in a nutshell, ended up doing a KBS Korean drama in Vietnam because they were filming there as well. I became the face on the billboard that says "Welcome to Ho Chi Minh City." At one point, it was very odd. I don't know how I got on that billboard. I ended up becoming the face for Samsung when I was out there in Southeast Asia. All these things started happening. And yeah, long story short, I made some noise and was able to get the attention of some producers and managers back in the States, which then led me to my first Hollywood film in like 2010, I believe. So that's a lot wrapped up in like a few sentences.
Of course.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. It was a great experience. And that's what I mean. I think it had to be meant to be. There was too many weird things that happened, which were great things that enabled me to not only have that time in Vietnam and Southeast Asia to get that exposure and to get that limelight to propel me back to my home city, which is the biggest irony in this whole thing. Right. So.
And was that your first time living abroad, living in another country? Like for that, I guess for that long.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another thing I always talk about is, just because of the athletic and academic commitments for being, a college athlete at Yale, I wasn't able to study abroad, right? I wasn't able to take these trips during the summer because we were training. And so another thing I'm so grateful for, about this job that I do, it's allowed me to live like places in Southeast Asia where I would never have thought I would ever end up, let alone for a vacation, let alone for 2 years, and that's something I'm so grateful for because, I was such an American growing up where I was like, why go anywhere else? We're in the US, right? And that's just how I was raised by my parents. I didn't know any better. And so now this job has allowed me to just see the world and open my eyes and get contextual background on all these different places. And it's really been life-changing. So just totally grateful for what the job has enabled me to do.
Absolutely. And I always find it fascinating. I did not live anywhere for 2 years. I have lived abroad and in Asia, and I always learn something about myself every time, especially being an American, growing up in America, but having, a Chinese background and having this culture and then living there is a whole nother ball game. And what would you say you really learned about yourself, like living over in Vietnam, since you do have some lineage?
I think the one thing I learned was how much I love what I do. I remember my dad came to visit me when I was in Vietnam, and obviously he knows me very well and he knows my tendencies and what I like and what I don't like. And, Vietnam was kind of me paying my dues, so to speak. I was like, I'm coming in this industry late. I don't expect any handouts or any freebies. I got to put in my work. And I was definitely putting in my work out there, whether it was, set life. Set life is very different in Vietnam than in Hollywood. Food, I grew up eating Mediterranean food and like, Italian delis and salads. And I don't really eat a lot of Asian food. So when I was there, thank God the French influence is there. You could get your baguettes and all that stuff in Vietnam, but I don't have a wide range of taste, and I try to always keep it very simple. And so obviously my stomach is very sensitive because of that. So that was a huge challenge, and it still is. I've gotten better with it, but especially that young and being in, Southeast Asia and just dealing with the food. obviously I didn't have to worry about gaining weight because it was hard enough for me to eat. And it was so hot. I was just sweating every day because of the humidity. So calorie counting was not an issue at all for my 2 years in Vietnam. But, I think what I learned is, just like I said, how much dedication and how much passion I have for what I do. The joke is my dad came home and told my mom, he's like, I don't know how he's doing it, because knowing this kid and seeing how he's doing it out there, he loves it, and so for me, it was just finally finding, that was honestly the win. The win for me was just finding something that I'm passionate about, that I'd be willing to go anywhere for. And it's acting, it's performance. So, I feel like I really found my calling when I went to Vietnam, because I remember literally sitting on like a red plastic stool in the middle of the jungle, literally the jungle in the north of Vietnam, rumored where Ho Chi Minh had gone and passed away. And it was a period piece we were shooting, obviously. So I just remember sitting there, and it was so quiet, and just looking around at all the bamboo forests. And scenically, it's beautiful, but it's also 95% humidity, 90 degrees, no bathrooms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm in layers of makeup and wardrobe, and I'm just dripping, thinking like, what am I doing here? You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
But I loved it. Yeah. And I've seen I have photos of moths that are like this big.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? Like on our big set lights at night, the craziest stuff I wouldn't have never seen. And it just brought me back to the point where, you know what, I love doing this. And I think that's the thing I learned, and glad I did it then. Now that I'm older, my patience has grown, and I'm very patient, but I don't know about my physical tolerance right now. You know what I mean? Yeah. We're spoiled. Well, I'm spoiled. I know you're not in LA, but I'm spoiled in LA with the weather and the food and all those comforting things, but still open, if the job calls me to go somewhere, like I'm down, let's go, but it was great self-discovery, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like a fascinating journey. I'm kind of the opposite, where I'm so excited to try all the foods of the different lands. And I was fortunate to have traveled the world since I've been young. And I'm always asking about the food, and you're like, oh, I had to prepare myself and I lost weight. And I was always the direct opposite. I'm like, oh gosh, don't put me anywhere where I love the culinary, because it would be such a problem. But it does sound like such a fascinating adventure. And, you kind of talking about sitting there in the jungle, and historically there's so much going on there. And I believe, if I have it correct, you majored in like history, like you have a love for understanding history. And so that also must have had just like a really strong connectivity for you. And ironically, as an activist here, I'm in Florida now. I work on a lot of initiatives, and I'm currently working on a bill to include Asian American history here in our education curriculum with a state representative. And it's going to be quite a battle. But I feel like I could learn a lot from you, since that was kind of your, focus in school. And can you tell me maybe why you picked that? And I know you ended up doing law and things like that, but I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Great research on me. Like a lot of people don't ask me about that, which is cool. But you bring that up, and I don't know. Ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated with history. And it's oddly that we're talking about Vietnam, because when I was as old enough to literally, it was before I could read and write, but as old enough to be able to hold a book and flip the pages, I was always fascinated with the Vietnam War, which was really odd because ethnically I'm not Vietnamese. I don't have that background. But it was something that pulled me to these like lifetime hardback books that my mom purchased for me when I was really young, of just everything to do with the Vietnam War, and I was so fascinated by that. And that's why it's so weird, because so many years later, I end up in that country, being the spokesperson for a lot of their brands, and just, being a public figure for those 2 years, literally. And so I guess I've always had a history bug. Just because my father's a sports orthopedic surgeon. So, and I'm the oldest, and naturally he wanted me to pursue medicine. So the sciences was always like ill for me, to be honest. I was always like, oh, I don't like cutting up things and dissection and, cells and all, I was like, I don't really care about this stuff, but history was always cool to me because I don't know. It was something that I always looked forward to. I would love the liberal arts. And so, at Yale, I of course did my pre-med recs because that was what I was supposed to end up doing, which was a battle just because it's like anything else. You love what you learn what you love. Right. And so that was like just chem and bio and all that stuff. Just, it was like pulling teeth, but, humanities wise, Yale has a really good liberal arts department with their U.S. history and American studies department. And, just really fell in love with the American studies focus, and more specifically the Asian American studies focus. And I talk about this to a lot of my peers back in the day because I was also curious, like why I was pulled into like kind of like that subject matter. And I think it's because, or now I know it's because, being fourth generation Chinese Japanese, I was always kind of searching for my identity culturally growing up. And, obviously if you're first generation and you come here, then it's all about assimilating. And then if you're second generation, it's like my parents speak this at home. They make me eat this stuff, but I want to be more like my friends kind of thing, at least from what I've seen through my friends. Right. Yeah. And then third generation is kind of like my mom, where she's like, I'm not doing that stuff because I'm American. So I'm going to raise my kids American. So we grew up, my brothers and I, when I say we grew up with almost like this void of like, hey, we know we're American, we assimilate perfectly fine with all races. But what is our history, And I always thought of it as like a cycle, right? So it's like the first generation's here, second generation, third generation kind of rebels, maybe second rebels, but then fourth is like, hey, where are we from, right? And I discovered that I had this interest in just kind of self-discovery again, and that being said, I focused in Asian American studies at Yale and was actually one of the first individuals, along with two other of my peers at the time, to have Yale recognize the Japanese American Students Union at then, just because, we had the Chinese American, we had the Taiwanese American, we had Vietnamese American, we had Korean American, but there wasn't a Japanese American. And it's kind of, obviously historically Filipinos had been the first quote unquote Asian Americans to be here. But then the second was the Japanese, yet Yale had not recognized that group yet. And so even when I was there, the fact that we got it recognized from the board and Yale officially like allowed us to have that Japanese American Union was a big win just on the academic side for me. But when I look back at it, it's just about self-discovery. It's like, who am I? And who am I in this greater picture of the US history, which is so ironic because it comes full circle when we do something like Warrior, or we do something like Man in the High Castle, what I mean? So like, I'm a history guy. I love it because it never changes, right? Like you can always go back and those dates are set and those events happen. It's just about diving deeper into those specific times and whatnot. But I don't know. I just really enjoyed it. And that's kind of the motivation behind it. I mean, it sounds really selfish because it was like basically like I want to learn about myself, right? But then it was weird because I couldn't, unless because I grew up, a part of my childhood is in Hawaii where there's a lot of more Asian Americans of like fourth and fifth generation. So I could relate to them and they could relate to me. But then you get into the part where my friend is Chinese, Japanese, Korean, German, Hawaiian, Samoan, right? And you're like, okay, so what should we talk about? You know what I mean? Because so it was, to be Chinese, Japanese, in California and during when I was growing up was pretty rare. And I didn't meet a lot of people that shared that same ethnic kind of background. But, now everyone's mixed and there's a lot of assimilation, a lot of crossover, which is great. But, it was just all motivated, I think, by those like subconscious things of like, where am I? Who am I?
Yeah.
Where am I on the screen? I don't see myself, so that's, I think that's the reason.
Yeah, I love that. It makes a lot of sense though, because your circle of 1, 2, 3, 4, because my parents are immigrants, right? And so what you say really does hold true in terms of feeling like you want to fit in and, your parents speaking one language or whatnot. And so it's just such an interesting dynamic. But I do think there is something very kismet about your life of, you're at Yale and then you go to law school and then you get apart and then you go to Asia and then you're here. And also you have this history background and you get thrown into one of the most historical shows that is just trying to like draw that line of a lot of the Chinese immigrant experience. And Warrior, of course, is a perfect seg. And of course, it's interesting because in Man in High Castle, I know it's a little bit of an alternate history. So you had said, well, history doesn't change. And I was going to say, except for Man in High Castle.
Until someone writes it differently, right? Yeah.
But I love alternate history stuff. So I always find that really fascinating because it's the what ifs and that can take us down a million rabbit holes. But I feel like this is also why, being fourth generation, why your stomach wasn't ready for the Asian food because you weren't trained and it wasn't beaten into you. but it's like anything else. It's what you're used to and what your training takes you through. But this is a perfect opportunity, of course, to bring up Warrior because it must be fascinating to basically be working on a show that, while it's historical fiction, there are so many historical things that happen throughout the show that is so important to Asian Americans because a lot of people, hence my bill that I'm writing here, don't know a lot of the history. And of course, they're kind of hitting up a lot of these a little bit more notable things, but ironically, as these discussions have come about, it is shocking how little we do know because we didn't get to learn that history. So I love that you discovered that in college, and I probably could learn a lot about it from you. But our fans and your fans, mostly all your fans, really want to hear about is, of course, Bolo and Warrior. You have a ton of fans that are hashtagging to bring Bolo back. It's such a popular character on that show. What does it feel like to have a petition and also to have been this iconic character that is so beloved on such a beloved show?
I mean, gosh, I love this question and I hate this question because number one, it's just, it's very overwhelming to this day. And I don't just say that because when we finished season 1 and I came home and I was like, I hope this show represents, period, because I did it for Bruce Lee. I did it for Bruce Lee and his family. And that's it. You know what I mean? That was enough. I mean, that's more than enough, but that was enough. And so to see, the first round of fans who watched it on Cinemax respond in the way they did was mind blowing, and then to see that fan base grow to when it was on the HBO Max platform, which it still is, and to see it kind of explode again in 2021 while season 2 has already aired. And then it's so crazy for me to say my fans, because I believe it's our fans, our fans of the show. They're the best fans, everyone says that, but it's really the truth. I mean, because we have some day one fans that I remember, like the first time I did this after dark kind of Instagram live thing after the first episode on season 1. I mean, there's people that were in that chat room that just saw me in Seattle a couple of weeks ago at this meet and greet I did. And I'm just like blown away. I mean, it's 2021. It aired in 2018, I believe, was the premiere of season 1. And it's like, what is going or 2019. But it was just like, it's crazy, to me to think that people who have their own lives and their own families and whatnot, and especially with Corona and all this, still take the time to be like, yo, like, we love your show, and it's awesome. I mean, it's just very humbling and it's kind of unrealistic, to be honest. I don't feel like it's real sometimes. So now fast forward to like this Bring Bolo Back petition, which has been started by a group of very, very loyal day one fans that I got nothing but love for. I just smile, I wake up to all these DMs and I wake up to all these postings and people send me stuff. I'm just like, like it's a character, you know what I mean? Like, it's one character and to have this kind of response to it, it's overwhelming to say the least, but again, I always just stay focused to the reason why we did it, as my team and I decided to do it was, I mean, when Bruce Lee Entertainment calls you and they want you to do something, you do it, especially based on my upbringing. I always say this, it was Bruce Lee and it was Michael Jackson. those are the two iconic figures. And I lived with my family in Encino, so that was close to Michael. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Bruce Lee, I just felt like that's who I want to be, you know? And so when one of those groups, if Michael Jackson's found, you know, if they called, I'm there. You know what I mean?
You're like, I can dance. I'm good.
Yeah, I don't know if I didn't say I could dance, but I'll fake it till I get. Yeah, I'll figure it out. You know what I mean? But I mean, it's just so iconic and epic to, you know, to be asked and cast by his family, and of course by Justin Lin and Jonathan Tropper and Danielle Woodrow and the whole crew. To take part in something as meaningful as this, you know, because, you know, yeah, we're the first, you know, Western Asian American cast, you know, English speaking drama action TV series, but it's so much more than that. You know, Warrior represents something that Bruce couldn't do back in the 70s, just based on pure discrimination, you know, and the fact that we were able to film that in South Africa, you know, the pinnacle place, the pinnacle country of apartheid and racial discrimination, you know, at the top, you know, was just so, so meaningful in so many ways that it was just meant to be.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact that we weren't even sure about season 2, you know, at the time. I mean, you know, the fans don't know this, but, you know, we kind of thought it was done after season 1. And then season 2 got greenlit and we're excited. It's like, oh, are they going to bring Bolo back for season 2? And all these things came up. And then I end up not making it back in season 2. Then I was like, okay, season 2's done. Cinemax is finished. And then HBO Max is like, we don't think we're going to carry you guys. And we're like, why not? It's like a good show, you know? And then all of a sudden they're like, actually we are. And it just beat Game of Thrones on most views. So I guess we'll do season 3 now. You know what I mean? So it's this roller coaster ride, but you know, as long as it keeps going, you know, like I said, it just keeps Bruce Lee alive. You know, I mean, within the martial arts community, he's always alive, you know, but I just feel to the greater global population, it just keeps that, especially the youngsters and the younger generations, that constant. I love it. I'm really good friends with this one family, and they has a set of twins. And they're super young, but they're all about Bruce Lee. You know what I mean? And it's so cool to see even young kids, like under the age of 10, still in love with the man, still trying to emulate the man, still trying to, you know, mimic him and do all those cool things and iconic things that, you know, we all grew up on. So that's the goal, and that's what we're doing. So I couldn't be happier. And again, shout out to my fan club and to all the Bring Bolo Back campaign people. Like it's more than I expected, and I'm super grateful to them.
Well, so. I always want to recognize that, because I think that it's like you said, kind of sometimes it can be cliche to say or the same thing, but you know, the fans are really what makes everything. I mean, they petitioned also for season 3 to come back, and you know, there is a lot of power in the voices of those that support. And I've unfortunately met so many people that don't appreciate their fan base or don't want to, meet the fans. I've been following you on social, and it's so amazing to see how warm you are with everybody and how you literally engage with everybody online. I don't know how you do it. It's kind of a miracle to me, because I'm very not so great at social media, but I do have a few fan questions that I picked out that I threw out there that I want to give them some love. So one of them was, what is your favorite role you've played? And that's from Night Gray.
Oh, Night Gray. Well, Night Gray just did this edit, you know, and that's what I've been trying to do. I've been trying to remember people's names, and, you know, cause when you mentioned about my interaction, it's like, I remember as a kid when I would meet someone that I was a fan of, you know, and I'm not going to drop names, but I, you know, sometimes I was disappointed, you know, and so other times, like, I'll never forget, you know what I mean? Like, I will never forget the first time I met, you know, so-and-so, because of what they did or how they received my, hey, how are you? You know what I mean? So that's where I just become, I'm a fan too. You know what I mean? Like, so that's where that motivation comes. But Night Gray just did this amazing edit, on Instagram that I have to repost. It was a collaboration thing of all the Bolo scenes and the music, the vibe, the coloring. It was sick. So I appreciate Night Gray 100%. That's why I know who that is.
Awesome. I figured.
It's fresh in mind. Yeah. My favorite character, I mean, gosh, the easy answer would definitely be Bolo, just because of all the significance around Bruce Lee, the actual character of Bolo Young, the cast, the directors, the producers, like the entire family, and I think that's the easy answer. I think though, however, if I were to dig deeper and change that question to like, not favorite, she asked what my favorite character, right? Mm-hmm. I would say what the character I'm most proud of. Mm-hmm. And this does not take away from Bolo at all, because that's pinnacles. That's epic stuff for me in my life and will always be. But I actually just did it. I did an episodic on this show, on this NBC show, or it could be CBS. I'm so wrong. I'm so bad right now. I apologize to both networks if I'm wrong. But it was with Edie Falco. And it was called Tommy. And it was just, they just lasted for one season. But the reason why this was a huge win for me personally and for my team was because I was able to play a gay man in a relationship with an adopted Chinese daughter. And some people may not understand why that's a big deal to me. And it's because of why you and I are both here today. Because we're breaking down barriers, we're representing, and at a time where representation matters so much. That goes not only racially, but also, sexual, how you identify sexuality wise, and in the community. And, growing up in LA and going to high school in San Francisco, I've been exposed to the gay community from an early age. And I've asked those same questions where it's like, why is this gay character talking this way, dressing this way, looking this way? I know plenty of gay men who do not identify with the gay stereotype that Hollywood projects, Yeah. Because I don't want to even be politically incorrect when I say these things, but, I'm so comfortable with the gay community and with all my friends in the community that, it's like, what does a gay man look like? Literally, you know what I mean? It seems like a kind of a weird question, but when you think about it, it's like, you get an audition, it's like, he's gay. All of a sudden people start thinking, oh, I need to dress this way. I need to talk this way. I need to, my body needs to be this direction. You know what I mean? It's why? Because I've met plenty of gay men who don't fit that stereotype. Mm-hmm. So, and I always laugh because I've auditioned for other gay characters before in which they went the typical way, and, whether that's my physicality, whether that's my vibe, my energy, they're just like, oh no, that he's not gay. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Right. So yeah. I remember this audition so clearly because, it's just an episodic and, my agent was like, do you want this? They're requesting you. And I'm like, yeah, totally. Let's do this, Mm-hmm. So I taped it, we book it. And I remember I was so excited because I was like, you know what? I'm not only representing for Asian American gay men, but I'm representing for just gay men in general, because I was the alpha in the relationship, which a lot of gay Asian men usually don't play the alpha on screen, which also is weird. Right. I know plenty of gay men, and you know what I mean? I'm yes. Where are you guys? So for me to play that and for me to play it in the way I did, because I was very specific on my choices, and for it to be on network television, was just a huge win for me. Yeah. Because I'm a martial artist. Yeah. I can do action. Yeah. I Warrior is very rich. That's me. Bolo is, that's maybe not me right now. Maybe when I was a little younger, right. But that's
not a
me.
Huge stretch.
Yeah. I didn't have to go somewhere dark, right? To how am I going to do this character? Right. But, and so, so for me, those kind of roles, even high castle roles, mm-hmm. the inspector, the captain, those are kind of in my back pocket. Those are the tools I carry around.
Yeah.
Playing a gay Asian American dad right, with a Caucasian husband. That's not me, yet I was able to represent for not only myself, but also for the community, so to me, that was a very meaningful job, which, didn't get a lot of recognition, but that wasn't the question. The question was, favorite or more, and I changed it to most meaningful.
Yeah, no. And you should be unbelievably proud of that. And that's Tommy on CBS, by the way. And so next question.
CBS.
Yeah, next CBS. Question. Wu-Tang Killer B asks, the coolest character I'm considering on Warrior, they mean after Bolo.
Okay. Well, I kind of piggybacks on this last answer. I'd have to say High Castle, and it's because
I think they meant on Warrior.
On Warrior.
I think they mean on Warrior. Obviously, talking to you, they're saying after Bolo. I think they mean on Warrior. I am interpreting this question, but
that's
I think
fine. So the coolest
who do you think's the coolest character on Warrior? Not Bolo.
Not Bolo. Inferring Bolo is the coolest.
Right. That's why I think I'm interpreting it. So.
Got it.
This is all about Rich, so I'm presuming.
Oh, I love it. I think, man, I would have to say Jason Tobin's character, Young June, because that's my guy. I didn't know him before. Actually, I was a fan of Jason before because I remember Better Luck Tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah, man. I remember when Jonathan Tropper told me, he was like, "Oh, we got Jason Tobin to play Young June." I was like, "Oh my God, that's crazy." I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Because Jason had moved back to Hong Kong and I hadn't seen him, on screen for a little bit. And so to kind of unite, because it's not like I met him before, but, he was one of those guys that I saw when I was a kid growing up. And then to work with him and to see his work ethic and his process, and I can just hang out with that guy. We do hang out, when he's back, in the States, we hang out. Our wives are really good friends. Like, we're all friends. It's a family.
Yeah. Well, Jason's awesome. I just talked to him a couple of weeks ago and we were just on and off air, like going back and forth because I love Hong Kong, and he's fantastic. No,
he has a tremendous amount of knowledge and perspective, which I completely, respect. And, so I'm biased because I spent the most time with him, obviously.
Right.
On Warrior, but, and that's where the relationships develop, it's off camera. And that's why, like, when people go, "Oh, I love like you and Young June's dynamic," that's all because I believe, and I'm a strong believer in this, that us off screen, we were like brothers, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when we get to play on screen, naturally those little things come out, that maybe wouldn't be there had we not had that strong a relationship. So,
yeah. But
I just like I love the fact that you never know what Young June's going to do. He's like this ticking time bomb that, he's like no fear. He has this immortality like vibe with him. Like he's not really reckless, I wouldn't say, but he's just down. Like, I mean, he's that guy you need, and growing up like in real life situations, like, I respect that kind of guy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I would say Young June 100%. And that's not to offend anyone else on the cast.
Of course. It's a tough loaded question.
Now, like Perry's gonna be like, "What about your dad?" You know what I mean? So
No, I don't think so. I've been very fortunate to have been talking to a lot of the Warrior family, and it's exactly that. I really feel, just from speaking with everybody, what a family unit you were on and off screen. And like you just said, particularly off screen, it's just clear how well everyone got along. And, after talking to Brett, it just seems like such a cool environment to be at. And just, so I can see why, it translated on screen, but it totally makes sense that you guys all hang out. And I don't think anyone will take offense, so don't worry. Okay. All right. Last fan question, and then we'll move on. Bring Bolo back. I have to give them a question, of course. They want to know what storyline is better: Bolo returns in flashbacks, or Bolo's twin comes back to avenge him.
Yeah. Honestly, like, I would want both.
Ooh.
I would want flashbacks because I believe, the Yellow Demon's history. Mm-hmm. People are thirsty for it. You know what I mean? So am I. My whole thing was, I kept telling Jonathan Tropper, I was always like, why doesn't he fight Lee Young? obviously there's history with Joe Taslim's character because there's a mutual respect, which means how did you come to this mutual respect, right? It's because there was, I won, he won, or we both won, or there was a draw or something, but you just don't have the two powerhouse lieutenants of each tong just kind of stand opposite and kind of just subtly show respect in a weird way, right? Mm-hmm. There's got to be history there. I love the episode of the Yellow Demon and the railroad and Father June, rescuing me from that underground fighting circuit, but let's get into more of the, okay, why doesn't he fight? I mean, with the Irish and even the cops, that's all that could happen organically in the future. Right. But let's go back to the history, like what's his history with the Long Z? What's his history with Joe, with Leon. So that's a flashback I would love to do. Mainly just because I love Joe. I think he's fantastic.
And you want to fight him.
Yeah. And I know because there's a mutual respect, neither one of us can really get messed up. You know what I mean? Like, obviously he doesn't kill me or I don't kill him, right? Otherwise there wouldn't be a present. So that would be a flashback I would definitely love to do. I would love to do a young June flashback, of me and Jason and kind of how that brotherhood has come together. Because if you see how we kind of welcome and kind of don't welcome Andrew's character, in the beginning of season 1, I'm sure him being the blood son of Father June there had to been some kind of rivalry, jealousy with all of a sudden him with Father June bringing in Bolo. Right. Mm-hmm. It couldn't be like, hey, this is your new brother. Like, you guys are going to get along. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure with young June's attitude and demeanor, that wasn't an easy transition. And that respect and camaraderie had to be earned as well. So that's another kind of flashback I would love to like dissect and get into. But like I said, why not both? Right. So why not bring his twin brother from China overseas to the States, because he hasn't been in touch for a certain amount of time. And he's been sending money back, and all of a sudden the money stops and there's family problems. But, the notion that came from, I would say, Warrior's creative team in-house was, let's go opposite of Bolo for his twin, and this is where I would love to incorporate the academic historical side, because if you're following Warrior season 1 and 2 right now, we're creeping towards the Exclusion Act. We're getting to that period before the big earthquake in the early 1900s, right? Which basically destroyed all the Tongs and destroyed Chinatown. So let's bring in that academic side, which is Bolo's twin. He doesn't take off the shirt. He doesn't. Maybe he can. I don't know if your fans
will like that.
Yeah. Like, he's conservative, he wears the traditional.
Glasses.
Yeah, he wears the traditional, but it's Bolo's twin. If you can imagine that guy wearing the Q with the glasses, with the shirt, you know what I mean? With the jacket, and then being an academic activist, someone like you who's trying to get bills passed, right? Let's go from that angle. And all of a sudden he gets cornered and stuff has to happen. That's where Brett Chan needs to have a conversation with Bolo's twin and be like, okay, do you fight him with books? Do you fight him with, like a Buddha bead thing or something? Like let's get creative, Brett. You know what I mean?
Totally get creative here. I can see you haven't thought about this at all.
I mean, it's funny. I leave every project, and this is strictly based on the fan response.
Right. Yeah.
Like, honestly, I would have never ventured. I do all this work before season 1, to be honest.
Yeah.
I do all the prep before. And then once I'm done, I'm done. And it's the damn fans. They won't let me die. Like, they're just like, I keep telling people I'm dead. And they're like, but you're not, and I'm like, okay. So,
but you live on.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Jason, a couple of weeks ago invited me to come out and be Hopway. So I'll join you on the boat, and then I'll be the first female Hopway. That's my goal.
Let's go.
I want that red pocket square, damn it. So either way, I'm set crashing South Africa. So even if you're not on the show, we're all going.
Yeah, let's go.
It's party time. So, all right. Well, I have to talk to you about martial arts, obviously, because I do have a lot of martial artists that also follow, because that's like my thing too. But talk to me about your training, because, clearly you have worked really hard, and I know you have a background in Taekwondo and I think Jeet Kune Do and Wing Chun. Is that correct?
Yeah. My foundation is in Taekwondo. I started that when I was about 4 years old. Earned my black belt when I was 12. And that's really just, and that's one thing, like, not to discriminate against other arts, but for me, Taekwondo is such a fundamental technical martial arts that I really enjoyed it just because of the forms, and it got me into the Taekwondo fighting and sparring, stuff like that. I used to do the tournaments a lot, and that was
it's very structured. I can see you like structure.
Yeah, I do, because then all you have to do is just act. You just do. You know what I mean? You don't have to think really. You just do. So I like to simplify things, and but one thing I'm grateful for is I feel like Taekwondo really gave me the foundation as a martial artist to venture into other arts as well. And it wasn't until high school that I actually started working out and training with a lot of the San Francisco Police Department cops. A lot of there's a unit called Crash, which is kind of like their gang task force unit. And I call him, he's an uncle of mine, not blood related, but very close to the family. And he, his father and his brother, they have studios in the Bay Area, and he was a detective at the time, and we would train on the weekends, and it was great for both of us. It was great because realistically, I represented one size-wise and physicality-wise that a lot of these gang task force cops would have to engage with on the street. And on the flip side, it was great because I'm dealing with grown men who are police officers who have a certain type of technical background as well. You know what I mean? So it wasn't just like, I know you don't come from any background whatsoever, but grab him and take him. It was guys that are used to putting hands on people, so to speak. And that's what ventured me into the Wing Chun and Jeet Kune Do world. And so that really opened my eyes, just because, I always say Taekwondo is so orthodox and so traditional. Unfortunately, we get in situations, especially when I was younger, growing up, that we try to avoid and whatnot. But, if again, self-defense, and you're in a situation where you're being threatened, you're not gonna throw a stance with a down defense or like an upper, you know what I mean? Like, you got to react, you know what I mean? And that's where I believe the Jeet Kune Do and the Wing Chun really, really helped me, just, as far as excelling my art to another level, at the same time, just bringing in a realistic element that literally, like, any situation, the most random situation, guy comes here and you're able just to parry and just disarm, or, I mean, it sucks to talk about it because I'm like thinking about all these weird experiences I've had where, thank God, I was trained, and I think that's why I love that style. It's because you can go out and not use it, but use it if you have to, so to speak, and then eventually, once I got into Hollywood, there's so many amazing stunt coordinators and fight choreographers. Brett's not bad. He's all right. But nowadays, it's just a mix. It's really MMA on camera, and it goes back to, like, being motivated by, like, the Bourne movies with
Matt Damon.
With Matt Damon. And, now you got to be flexible, is what I always say. I just finished a project right before the pandemic with Jeff Bridges, which hasn't come out yet. It'll be on Hulu. And it's probably one of the most epic fight sequences of my career.
Ooh, is that the old man?
That's the old man. And it was challenging because they trusted me with Jeff, which I am so grateful for. The stunt coordinators were really excited and pushed for me to get cast, just because they had worked with me before and they needed someone to be violent, but also keep Jeff safe. And, at the time, Jeff was 70, I think he's 71 now, but, it's like the dude, man, like you know, protect the dude. Right. So it's like, that was challenging in itself just because, you know, I'm confident in my skills and in my control. But at the same time, you know, that thing in our sequence, it's jujitsu, it's Wing Chun, it's Jeet Kune Do, it's combat, it's messy, it's grimy, you know what I mean? And you just don't know what you're going to get these days, you know? So, I mean, I always say, as long as you come from a certain discipline, just be flexible, you know, because nowadays you get with a guy like Brett Chan, and he's going to sit you down and be like, what do you want to do? You know, and we're going to stylize it. You know, that's why it's funny, because Bolo, he's traditionally the Hung Gar Kung Fu background is what we kind of characterized him as. But then even guys on set, like the crew, they'd be like, bro, that was such a Taekwondo kick. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, hey, I just point to Brett. I'm like, he told me to do it. You know what I mean?
I blame Brett.
Like, you know what I mean? And he's like, spin wheel kick. I'm like, really? You know what I mean? I'm like, okay.
Well, when you have the talent to do the kicks, it's kind of a waste not to use them.
Well, that's what's funny. So, I mean, to the normal viewer who doesn't have a martial arts background, it's fantastic.
Yes.
To the martial artist who's watching, is like, wait a minute, dude. Yep. Like, 100%. I saw that setup step. Like, that's so, you know, but it's in my blood, so I can't hide it. You know? So.
Yes. We were. It's true. You do watch with a different eye when you're a martial artist. Like, totally. They studied this, or they haven't studied at all, or or they're a dancer and translating it. It's pretty interesting. But I'm gonna have to. I know I don't want to take up too much more of your time and be mindful of it, but I have to ask, because you mentioned, you know, being in all these combat situations. I mean, did you get in a lot of fights and stuff back in the day? It sounds like you had kind of a tumultuous experience in the past. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But you mentioned it, and I'm like, I'm going to have to ask what you're... I like to say I have a healthy background and a healthy upbringing. Okay. You know, which well-rounded. Means like yes, well-rounded, you know, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, I mean, we could get into this in a whole nother discussion, but it's like, being, again, an Asian American kid, right? Like playing these traditional sports, football, basketball, baseball. And my parents purposely put me into, you know, these certain demographics, you know, African American leagues, that I was not only the only non-Black kid, but the only Asian kid, like for years. Like, I don't even remember like seeing anyone that looked like me or was of my ethnicity. So with that, you know, as kids, you know, kids are mean. You know, little kids are brutal. And so, you know, and then you start working out and you get an attitude, and all of a sudden you're in high school and you think you're greater than God. You know what I mean? So a lot of these situations happen, you know, and unfortunately things come up, but I'm still here. You know what I mean? And I avoided a lot of situations that could have been really bad. But I also was able to protect myself all the time. You know, and, but you know, I just think it's natural, especially growing up in inner city, that you encounter certain things. I always said, if you don't have a gun pointed at me, then you're going to get dealt with, you know what I mean? And even certain times when there were guns, then you run for your life. You know what I mean? And this is me too, just being, and I have to be so grateful to my parents, because I mean, these are experiences with the schedule I had, which was so packed. Like, they gave me no free time, you know, and that kept me out of trouble. You know what I mean? But still things arise. So I'll leave it at that. Just well-rounded. I love it. And I will take you up on the offer to talk more about like your AAPI upbringing, because I find it so interesting, and I think listeners do as well, because everybody has such a different experience. And then there's also shared experiences, and there's so much value in feeling that, in the same way that watching you on screen and feeling represented is, you know, a really amazing, you know, feeling to have. Right. So in that same way, though, like sharing stories of connectivity, whether you've had that or you didn't, but at some point, like these discussions are really, really valuable. I think, especially in this time where, you know, there's just so much dissonance, especially around Asian Americans. And I think, you know, the stories are really important to have role models like yourself who have overcome so many things and have success and have worked for that success and doing really amazing things on screen. So we thank thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
That's awesome. Hopefully you'll come back and talk to me again and this wasn't too painful. But
no, this is fantastic.
Excellent. We won't talk about food, unfortunately.
I mean, we could talk about food. Right. I mean, I'm a grown man now, I take my probiotics. Like I'm good.
Yes, just take more probiotics. You'll be good. I love it. All right, Rich Ting, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.